Welcome, everyone, to the Spirit of EQ podcast. I'm Eric Pennington, and with me is Jeff East. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hi, Eric, and everyone out there.
You know, when you told me you were going to do an episode on George Washington, I started thinking, wow, we are stretching to find those connections. It was so far back. And then you made it clear to me, it's not like we're doing an episode on George Washington. We're actually going to talk about something that doesn't get thrown around a lot in our culture, chivalry.
Yes. I got exposed to this several years ago when he was a young man, they think around 14, 15 years old, and they don't know if this was a penmanship class or if it was his parents made him to do this, but he hand wrote these 110 rules of chivalry. And he kept it with him his whole life, and it got preserved, and it's in the National Archives, I think, now, this actual handwritten thing he did.
So it must be pretty powerful.
Some of them are. What I did was I have it's actually a copy of it kind of on Kindle, and I was able to cut and paste. So we're going to use their language for some of these things.
Okay.
But I think just real quick, maybe talk about what chivalry is.
That's important.
I think the biggest thing is I found this dictionary or this definition on the free dictionary, and it's the combination of qualities expected of a knight. Now, we don't have to say a knight today, but I think this is just for everybody, including courage, generosity, and courtesy. So I thought this would be a good thing to talk about just how we get along with each other, how we treat each other through the day, and maybe, I don't know yet, maybe there'll be some connection to emotional intelligence in this.
All right. So I guess I can take it for granted that George Washington wasn't setting out to help with emotional intelligence when he wrote this. But
No.
Tell me, so what are some of the things that leaped out to you in that list of things?
Well, we can look at some of these. Some of these are very obvious in this book. Like one of them I put down is in company, lay not your arm, but only your hand upon the table. That's something our mom told us. Keep your elbows off the table.
Yeah,
So some of these are very common, very normal, everyday.
Gotten ingrained into the cultural norms.
Yes,
Right.
but it's, we still talk about that today.
Right.
But then some of these are a lot of them are a lot deeper, and I've just picked out 3 or 4 that we can maybe look about real quick. So,
All right.
superfluous compliments are to be avoided, yet where due, they are not to be neglected.
Well, that one makes you think.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that. Like I said, I had a whole bunch of them to pick from, but I think one of the problems we have today of we praise when it's not really
Praiseworthy.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't praise people, but sometimes we praise things that probably shouldn't be praised.
Yeah.
Actions and things like that.
Yeah.
And but then we neglect to praise when we should.
Yeah.
And that could be your family, the people you work with, your neighbors. But do you ever praise the cashier at the grocery store? Man, you did a good job, thank you. And mean it, not just say it because you're saying it or anything like that. Do we ever think about doing that in today's world?
Yeah. And quite frankly, I would go into some of that consequential thinking, cost and benefits of the choices you're going to make, and certainly for those that are not necessarily closest to you, I think it's even more applicable, right? Because it's really not expected, and you probably could get through that kind of situation you described without it. No one's going to pull you aside when you get out to the parking lot and say, hey, you missed out on an opportunity.
Right. So that's consequential thinking, developing a pattern of doing that. So there is some EQ in it. And the other thing is, when you talk about consequences, if you praise somebody for an action that's, questionable, what are you doing?
Yeah. And, one of the things that leaps out to me about why it's important too, Jeff, is that if we're praising people just in rote, it's just we're doing this. And I think this happens a lot with kids, where we're showering them with this language. And I think to a certain degree, it doesn't prepare them for the world they're going to face.
Right.
Where, quite frankly, you're probably not going to get those praises as often as you did when you were under the shelter of a home, of a family.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we need to substitute criticism for praise.
That's a very good call. We are definitely not saying criticize versus it's, I think, really being measured in the appropriateness of that.
Right. If somebody did something and, they could have done it better or something, give them encouragement, which is different than praise, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. You're getting good at that, but, whatever. But
yeah. And you can think about that too in one way, but is, I'm still from my friend Brett Castle, but is the word that is the hinge upon what positive or negative is delivered.
Right.
And I'm butchering his definition of that. But the idea is that, but gives us an opportunity to always return to the positive. I don't feel like I measured up to standards.
Right.
But I'm going to try my best tomorrow and give it another attempt.
I see what I could have done better.
Yeah.
And so move forward.
So using that but, because so often, though, it's left in the negative. We don't use the hinge, right? But anyway, I digress. How about another one?
Okay. At table, whatever happens, put a cheerful countenance, especially if there be strangers. For good humor makes one dish of meat a feast.
Very, very philosophical there.
And I think what that one means to me is, and not just necessarily in a meal, when you're with people, what's the important thing about being with people?
Being with people.
Being with people. If you're sharing a meal, great, you're together for that purpose. But if you're only concentrating on the meat, as it says in this one, you're missing out on the bigger opportunity. I mean, you can always just go get a sandwich and get the nourishment that you need. But if you're concentrating on putting on a cheerful countenance, which doesn't have to be happy, joy, but it means to me
communicating something that says you're welcome and you're here, and I'm glad that you're here.
I'm willing to listen to you, and I hope you let me talk. That you listen to me too. So I think that's important, and we miss that so much because if you're concentrating on your meal to get a good Instagram picture of your food, how present are you with the people you're around?
Well, that makes me think about what a friend once told me, is that life is a series of moments, and we should be very, very protective and conscious of those because they go by quickly. And you have to ask yourself again, what's more important, the post on Instagram or the presence of these human beings?
So I think that's an important thing is, it's the same, we talked about a meal. This one was talked about a meal, but if you're going to a game with someone, the game is still secondary for me. It's being with those people.
Yeah.
And in this case, it could be being with the stadium of people.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's nothing wrong if, if it's a game between your favorite team and another team and it's a big game. If you've communicated that I'm really coming, I really want to see this competition, that's fine. I think that's what you've made clear. And if somebody who says, well, hey, I was just going to go and I was thinking about hanging out with you and, I might leave at halftime because, sometimes I get uncomfortable in the seats. I mean, it's that don't leave it to assumption, I guess.
Right. So yeah, just be honest and open and what's going on. So I think that's important. I'm going to do these last two in different order.
Okay. All right.
Be not hasty to believe flying reports to disparagement of any. Which to me, if I'm interpreting his old English,
Yes.
don't buy into rumors.
Yeah. Gossip is a killer.
Gossip is a killer. And once again, if we talk about EQ with that one, when you hear the rumor, what emotion do you hear? Or you hear the gossip?
Mm-hmm.
If you get the emotion of I don't want to be involved in this, pay attention to that, because that emotion is telling you it stops right here. I'm not moving this forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it also is one of those things, Jeff, we should all remember that if somebody comes to you with some information that sheds a negative light on someone, just remember they could do that with you too.
Just remember, if they're doing that to somebody else, they probably are doing that to you.
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I remember. That wise sagely advice is that if somebody comes to you with gossip, you can pretty much count on it. They're doing it about you too.
And so I think that pay attention to the emotion, maybe some empathy. Once again, consequential thinking. If I pass this on, what damage is it?
Yeah, and when you mention empathy, you mean empathy toward the person that's being disparaged, that kind of thing. Yeah, and quite frankly, for the person, and I haven't found a gossip who ever said to me, I really shouldn't be doing this. So I think it's vitally important for not only the person being talked about, but also for that person as the potential chance that, hey, I don't participate. I mean, if you've got an issue with Jeff, you should pick up the phone or reach out to him directly and talk to him about it. This is not a place for me.
And, consequential thinking, if you hear this piece of gossip, or what did he call it? Flying reports, and you know that it is 100% not true, because you know the person they're talking about, you might think of the consequences of not saying anything to the person that was disparaged, or maybe you do need to say something. This is flying around, and it's going to be damaging to you. Yeah. So you have to use that consequential thinking to see, just, do I let it go, or do I need to take an active step and help this person that's being talked bad about?
Yeah, and I think another thing is this idea about paying attention, because, for example, if someone said to me, well, hey, Jeff and his family are involved in drug dealing, and I mean, they're not what you think they are. Well, my emotion, the emotion that's probably going to come to me is going to be anger, as in, how dare you say that? Yeah. It might be frustration. It might be disgust. And you can say, well, yeah, you're right, Eric, you should be. I'm not denying the feeling, but I need to give my prefrontal executive function of my brain an opportunity to go, okay, me being angry about them saying those disparaging things about Jeff and his family is not the issue. Because I know that's not who they are. So therefore, my anger needs to be moved to the side. I need to put my focus in on, okay, maybe it's appropriate for me to say, okay, Bill, tell me a little bit about what you're saying about the drug dealing, because that doesn't sound right to me. Tell me more about that. Yeah. And quite frankly, I might be really shrewd about, I want him to tell me more so I can put him in a hole to which he can, so you really don't know this, and you really actually are just kind of spreading things. That's what we're doing here. To me, that's a lot better decision than if I go, how dare you? And you know what I mean? Just
like you said before, you're confronting the flying report person is not going to change anything. Yeah. Then they'll just be more apt to talk about you.
Yep.
Okay, we've got one more.
One more. All right.
So yeah, this is not going to be one of our longer podcasts, but that's okay.
Yep.
Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience.
Hmm.
I think of all those 110, that is the one that struck me the most.
That's pretty powerful, even in the Old English.
Even I think the Old English makes it better. The little spark of celestial fire.
Yeah.
Called conscience. And that goes into so much of what we talk about in emotional intelligence. You know, it to me, that goes right to your noble goal, because we've talked about the noble goal, how it's the core of you. We've talked about core values. We've talked about all these things that are important to somebody that's striving to become a better person. And all those things, to me, come together as part of your conscience. And we don't, I see a total, or not a total, but a big lack of conscience in today's world. People.
Yeah, it's not encouraged.
It's not encouraged. People don't take accountability for what they do.
And the value that we place on it is not high as a culture.
Yeah, and if you don't have conscience when you harm someone in any way, you don't feel that consequential feeling inside of, well, I hurt someone.
And you know what also, Jeff? I think it also has to do with even ourselves. When we don't take advantage of the opportunities, when we don't choose to take a risk, that same harm can be done to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, what you said is big, no doubt. But I think there's an underlying or maybe underneath the surface tragedy, and that is that many people do that to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So here's here, if I can say here too, that small celestial light. Is that what he called it?
That little spark of celestial fire.
The little spark of celestial fire. We got to make sure we get that in the show notes. That's a money line there. Well, Jeff, thanks for bringing this to the episode today. It was kind of unexpected for me, but you know, I'm sure that there are many in the audience that feel the same. But there's some powerful points there.
I think you could, if you want to look these up, you can look them up. I'm sure you can find them on Google or something.
We can get that in the show notes. I would think maybe a link to something online that people can access quickly.
Yeah, some of them don't make much sense for us today.
Yeah,
but
that's okay, right?
But it's just the idea of they had these written down 200 years ago.
Yeah,
because people were expected to follow them.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
Well, thanks, Eric.
Absolutely, and everyone, we appreciate you tuning in again today, and we look forward to the next time we're together. Take care.